Welcome to the Utah Football Fans Podcast. Please like, subscribe, and share. And as always, go Utes. Hello, Utah fans. It's just Bryn here tonight. We have a very special episode for you. So a few months ago, we asked which Big 12 podcasters we should reach out to and try and do a collab with. And Heartland College Sports was the name that we kept hearing over and over again. So tonight's episode, we are joined by Pete Mundo from Heartland College Sports. He's going to give us all the insight into the Big 12, all the things that we are dying to know. But before we talk to Pete, we want to let you know about BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. From the preseason NFL to college kicking off, BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. And you think you know your stuff? Get in on the winner-take-all $300,000 NFL Survivor pool for the upcoming season. And then when the game's over, head on over to their online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of their 150 slots games. Head to the website today and use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, and get in on the action. Bet online, the game starts here. And all right, let's get into the interview with Pete Mundo from Heartland College Sports. All right, Pete, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really am so excited to talk to you. I mean, obviously, Utah, we're the new team in the conference, or one of the new teams in the conference, and I just don't know that much about the Big 12, so I need to lean on experts like you to help me learn about it, and I think a lot of Utah fans feel the same way. But just to start out, just give us a little intro about yourself and your show, Heartland College Sports, and like what the show's about and who should be following you and all that good stuff.
Yeah, well, we've been around for almost 10 years now with Heartland College Sports. So I started it. I work in media by day as well. I host a radio show in Kansas City. Prior to that, I was in Oklahoma. In between there, I was in New York doing stuff at Sports Illustrated, CBS, and Fox News. So I've kind of done a little bit of everything in the media space, and really built Heartland College Sports because I saw the ESPN bias, the Fox bias towards the SEC and the Big Ten. So I said, let's find a place where we talk about the Big 12. We write about the Big 12. And it started off with just me and a laptop and not knowing what I was doing. And almost 10 years later, we've got, a staff of about 6-7 folks who are helping out with writing, podcasting, video work. And it's obviously been a crazy 10 years in the Big 12. I mean, over the last really 13 months, we welcomed in and turned over half of this conference. So it's been a really exciting time, but it's tough for us too, because we're learning new teams, just like you're learning us as the Big 12. We're learning Utah, and for us, it's been a lot of fun because I just think there's been a lot of misconceptions and incorrect assumptions about the Utah fan base, and we've gotten to know them really well on some of our message boards and our forums that we have at heartlandcollegesports.com. And I'm just happy to say the initial reaction that I think many Big 12 fans had to Utah was a total incorrect assumption. And I have enjoyed all the Utah fans we've been interacting with the last several weeks.
Oh, good. Well, that makes me feel good. Yes. Obviously we've seen the social media chatter and things like that. We don't want to be coming into this conference hated.
No. And you can't ever top Texas. Everyone's like, oh, Utah's the new Texas. Nobody will be the new Texas. No one wants Utah to be the new Texas. Utah fans have been great. I think it was kind of like a bumpy relationship out of the gates, maybe, but I think the dust has settled. And I really think Utah fans are a great, and just Utah in general, is a great cultural fit for the Big 12. I think there's a lot of commonalities in the passion of this fan base, along with the Big 12 fan bases that maybe you didn't have around, large swaths of the Pac-12. So I think it's a great fit. I think that first game in Stillwater for Utah is just going to be electric, and it's going to be an awesome opportunity to really experience what the future of this league is going to be like.
You're definitely right about the passionate fan bases. Just, we have noticed that. And again, we haven't even started in the conference yet. But just over the last year, knowing we would be joining, we've already seen the engagement and interaction from these fan bases far superior than the fan bases in the Pac-12.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just see it on TV, and I look at the empty
Yeah.
stadiums at Cal and Stanford and
Yeah.
UCLA, and you're going to come to Stillwater, the place is going to be packed. Manhattan, Ames, I mean Lubbock, Texas, these places are right up there. Now, are they 100,000 seat stadiums like some of the Big Ten SEC schools? No, but you are going to get the environment of that with maybe 50 to 65,000, and you're not going to really notice the difference. Little smaller in scale, but great college towns. And I would encourage Utah fans to try to make as many road trips as you can to really kind of embrace that new conference and embrace that culture that I think this fan base will really fit into very well.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Okay. Well, let's start if you could. And this is for me, especially, I would love just a little background of the conference, maybe from like the last 5 years of which teams have kind of been on top, maybe which teams have struggled a little bit. Cause I think that's going to help me going forward to know like what's been going on for the past.
Well, I guess the best way to put it is it's just been, I think, as topsy-turvy as the future Big 12 is going to be. I mean,
Okay.
you look at the last 3 years in particular, there's been a team from the middle of the pack in the preseason poll that has reached the Big 12 championship game.
Mm,
Last year, Oklahoma State was picked 4th or 5th. They got there and lost to Texas, who was picked to win, but still, Oklahoma State got there. 2 years ago, TCU was picked 7th. They obviously get to the Big 12 championship. They lose to Kansas State. They make the playoff, and they reach the national championship game. And then 3 years ago, Baylor was picked 8th. They get to the Big 12 title game. They beat Oklahoma State, so they win the conference. So
okay.
there has just been that unpredictability for the last several years. But if you want to say who's been those teams, those kind of new blue bloods you look at in the Big 12, it would be Oklahoma State, it would be Kansas State. And then if you want to throw TCU in there just because of that 1 year, you can. But the consistent teams have been Oklahoma State and have been Kansas State. And I think Utah is going to fit into that top tier very well. I think those three teams coming down the home stretch will be competing for a spot in the Big 12 championship. Now, as you look to the bottom of this conference, last year in particular, a lot of the newcomers really struggled, especially the ones coming up from the group of five. But BYU, Cincinnati, Houston all struggled. And then UCF, they finished 500, but they let a couple of games slip away. I'm very high on them this year. I think they're going to make a big jump under Gus Malzahn, but all those new teams struggled. The difference this year is you have these four teams coming from, obviously, the Pac-12 and the Power 5 conference. So I think they're going to be in a position where they can succeed right away. I think Utah's going to win big. Arizona's got obviously great talent. They did well last year. They've got most of their star players coming back. Colorado is either going to wildly exceed expectations or fall flat on its face. And
Right.
Arizona State's the one where you say, okay, they've got a rebuild going on. But they're going to have much more success out of the gates than the four new schools from last year. And then you look at the remaining bunch. I mean, Baylor's got a situation where they won the Big 12 3 years ago, but Dave Aranda now is one of the hottest seats in the entire country, not just the Big 12. You go to a team like Iowa State that had the great run with Brock Purdy and Breece Hall, got that team to a Big 12 championship about 2020. It was the COVID year. They lost to Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game. All those guys came back, Brock Purdy, Breece Hall in 21, and they just didn't reach expectations that year. KU, a team on the upswing under Lance Leipold, the greatest turnaround in modern college football history in my eyes, the worst team in the Power 5 that now may have a Heisman contender in Jalen Daniels, and a team that, with a pretty soft schedule, could end up in Arlington for a Big 12 championship appearance. And Texas Tech has kind of been in this weird place, really dating back to Mike Leach, who has obviously since passed away. But you think about that tenure and that run was incredible going back 15 years ago, but they haven't found their footing under Cliff Kingsbury. Joey McGuire, I think, is going to be the guy. He's their current head coach. He's an old high school Texas football coach, and he's got this team on the right track. They put together back-to-back winning seasons in conference play for the first time since Mike Leach. So they're definitely a team to keep an eye on. And then West Virginia, starting to get back in the place they expect to be as a football program under Neil Brown. Won 9 games last year. He's off the hot seat, but they've got one of the toughest schedules in the country, but a lot of returning talent. So it is going to be just an incredible year. And the history of these teams and this conference is very much up and down. You can't really predict it.
That sounds fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Keeps it exciting. I mean, that's the
Yes.
thing is like I get tired of the same old, same old. Like I get tired of the Alabama every year in the national championship. Like that just gets tired to me because why watch it? If you
Mhm.
kind of already know who's going to be the winner, then why even watch? So I like the excitement of really not knowing.
Mhm.
Um, and Utah, I feel like we've had that in the Pac-12 the last few years. Like you could win or you could lose on any given Saturday. So it sounds like it's going to be similar to that this year. Um,
Absolutely.
well, so how do you feel? I mean, the Big 12 has gone through so much change over the last few years with you added some teams last year. Now you've lost some, but added more. Like, how do you feel about all the changes that have happened to the conference?
It's definitely an adjustment because, the Big 12 was kind of that last conference that felt very regional in a sense.
Yeah.
They had only 10 teams. The only real outlier, for the most part, was West Virginia after the four defections from over 10 years ago with Nebraska, Colorado, Missouri, A&M leaving. You bring in TCU, natural addition. West Virginia is a bit of an outlier, but it worked. And then, of course, Texas, no, you blow the whole thing up. But for the Big 12, it's one of those deals where these 8 teams that are remaining, they came together in a way that a lot of people didn't expect. And they moved quickly. They saved the conference. And now you look at the Big 12, and it's clearly the third of the Power Four conferences behind or ahead of the ACC, behind the SEC and the Big 10. And, there's not that Texas that frankly prevented expansion in 2017. The Big 12 was probably going to expand in 17 or 18, and Texas put a stop to it. I mean, that's the long and short of it. Texas put a stop to expansion in this conference about 6 or 7 years ago. Now, the good part about that is when Texas left, the Big 12 had done its homework on these schools. So they pivoted quickly. OU
Mhm.
and Texas, that article broke in the Houston Chronicle in July 28th, 29th of 2021. By September 10th, the Big 12 had added the 4 schools from last year because they already did their homework. So
Right.
you have, I think, a very cohesive conference that is good. There isn't that big traditional blue blood, as I put up the air quotes when I say it, because everybody feels like they're swimming in the same direction. And just ask the ACC how important it is to have everybody swimming in the same direction. And I'm telling you what, I think that SEC fans are going to learn this the hard way with Texas. They have blown up everything they've touched or tried to. They crushed and killed the Southwest Conference. They almost did it to the Big 12. And I don't know what their future holds in the SEC, but I promise you it's not going to be a happy marriage. And I'm here for it, by the way.
So Texas sounds a lot like USC from the
Yes,
Pac-12,
yes. A
who
very good comparison.
yeah, who
Yes,
blew up
absolutely.
the conference, and everyone was just sitting there going, "What are you doing?" And didn't wanna expand a few years ago. They put the stop to that. So, yeah, they sound very similar in a way,
Yes.
and I'm not gonna miss dealing with them.
They should get a room. I totally agree. They're overhyped every year. The media loves them. They fall flat on their faces for the most part. Texas had a great year last year, but that's the first time in 15 years Texas has actually met expectations. So, and I will say this about USC: a lot of Big 12 fans are not shedding a tear watching Lincoln Riley struggle the way he is, or at least he did last year.
Oh, yes. I think they're gonna struggle a lot in the Big Ten. I don't see Lincoln Riley having much success, but
Yeah.
that's just my prediction. I guess we'll see.
Hmm.
Um, okay, well, so moving forward to this season, which teams do you think are gonna have success in the Big 12? You kind of alluded to some of it, but who could you see being the teams that are towards the top at the end of the season?
Well, I think it's going to be Utah and UCF playing for a Big 12 championship in Arlington
Okay.
coming early December. I think that Utah will ultimately end up going 8-1 in the conference. I think that UCF will finish 7-2. And then I think you'll have a stack of 6-3 teams because it is going to be just a crazy year. I see Iowa State, Kansas State, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, and TCU all being in that 6-3 range behind Utah and UCF. And part of this too is, as I've noted and we talked about earlier, Bryn, I had you look at the numbers, the Big 12 has a team from the middle of the preseason AP or preseason polling that the media does that just always pops. And this year, I do think it's UCF because last year, UCF let a couple of games slip away. They were up by 30 points on Baylor and blew the game in the fourth quarter. And they were a play away. They hung in there with Oklahoma as well. If they pull off those 2 wins, they go 8-4 last year. And there's much more hype and intrigue around the UCF than there has been because they went 6-6. They've got a quarterback that I love in KJ Jefferson, who transferred from Arkansas, and I think is a perfect fit for Gus Malzahn. The closest thing he's had to Cam Newton since Cam Newton was, of course, playing for him and winning a national championship back at Auburn. But I really think UCF's going to pop this year, and I think they're going to be playing Utah for a Big 12 championship and a spot in the college football playoff in December.
That's a crazy. I haven't heard anybody pick that. So, and that would be crazy because UCF is our last game of the regular season. So that would mean us playing 2 weeks in a row.
Yes.
And that game does make me really nervous considering we have to fly to Florida the week of Thanksgiving. It'll be a short week. That's a lot of travel for Utah if they then, of course, are going to play in the championship the week after in Texas. So that's an interesting scenario. I haven't heard anyone predict that.
Well, I think what makes it even more interesting, if this plays out the way I think it could, is if Utah's 8-0 going into that game and they've got a spot in the Big 12 championship, do they rest players thinking, hey, we might play this team again next week. Let's get a little rest. Let's not show the playbook and let UCF win. But that would put UCF into the Big 12 title game. Or do they play it and play it hard because they just want to keep that momentum going? And the other thing about this that they've got to now consider is in a 12-team playoff, if they lose their final week of the regular season, and then if they were to lose again the following week, they probably can't get the at-large. But if they win the last regular season game, and then if they lose a Big 12 championship game, they can probably still get the at-large. So there's so many different scenarios that could play out those final 2 weeks. And that, to me, is going to be quintessential Big 12.
It is exciting. Like we talked about, it's exciting, and it makes it exciting all the way to the very end. So would you say UCF is your sleeper pick for the year then?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think TCU is going to surprise some people as well. No one's really talking about TCU, but I think Sonny Dykes is, 2 years ago, they got a lot of breaks, won a lot of close games. The ball it's cliche, but it bounced their way. But I've been talking about UCF and TCU on my show, Heartland College Sports on YouTube and on podcasts, saying, hey, just watch these teams. I think Texas Tech's flying a little bit under the radar as well. I do think Joey McGuire is set. If he can keep his quarterback, Baron Morton, healthy, he's set to maybe have a year where he pops and people don't see it coming. So that middle of the pack is going to be incredibly competitive in the Big 12. But I do think Utah, I really like this team, and I think they're going to separate themselves this first year.
So how familiar are you with Utah football? Or I guess, what do you know about Utah football? Or do you know much about Utah football, I guess, is what I should ask.
Well, no, it's a fair question. Have I sat and watched several Utah football games start to finish the last bunch of years? No. I mean, frankly, Pac-12 after dark as a Big 12 fan, I was usually tapped out by then. I mean,
I don't blame you.
And that's the thing. I think this will be good for these new teams because I get, that 10:30 Eastern slot is appealing for TV. But by then, I was doing stuff for the website. We were kind of reacting to games. I was kind of tapped out of watching games after 9-10 hours. Yeah. But the respect I think Big 12 fans have, and certainly I have, for what Coach Whittingham has done there, is something that, it takes you 5 minutes if you didn't know the history to realize this program has been built under 2 decades of his tutelage. And it's testament to him. It's testament to the university investing in this program the way they needed to. And to me, it's very similar to what Mike Gundy has done at Oklahoma State, where he just took this team, he put it on its shoulders, and he built a program, and he sustained this over 2 decades. Both these guys are 2 of the longest tenured coaches in the sport, along with Iowa's Kirk Ferentz. And it shows. I just think it's one of those things that you respect the program because they appear to do it the right way from the outside looking in, and they have beaten some of those blue bloods year in, year out, like USC. and they just don't get the attention and respect for that I think they deserve. And Oklahoma State fans, frankly, feel the same way about their program. So that's one of the many reasons I think this team will fit very well into this conference and be highly competitive.
What do you think? What can Utah expect playing? And every team's different, obviously, but is there like a style that embodies the Big 12? Like with Pac 12, you kind of knew going into it, it was the high flying offenses, the big quarterback play. And not every team fell into that, but that was kind of the overall vibe of Pac 12. Is there an overall thing we should expect from the Big 12?
Well, I think the Big 12's image has changed, and I think the media has been slow to realize that. A lot of people still think the Big 12 is the high-flying, quarterback-driven league of 10 years ago. And
Okay.
it's really it's not. It's not Mike Leach. It's not Art Briles. It's not, when Gary Patterson had Trevon Boykin and Oklahoma had, when they were obviously in the league with Lincoln Riley as offensive coordinator and then head coach. That's not what this conference is. I mean, when you look at this league, it really is. You're going to see some of the best running back play in the conference or in the country in the Big 12. In fact, I think the running back play in this league is arguably better than the quarterback play. It was certainly the case last year. The Big 12, yes, was that high-flying offense, but what you'll see is that oftentimes the Big 12 is ahead of the trends, ahead of the curve, and that's why you see a lot of the coordinators from the Big 12 getting poached to the Big 10 or the SEC. That's happened on multiple occasions. Kansas State's offensive coordinator, Colin Klein, he was a K-State guy. He was thought to be, the coach in waiting for Chris Kleiman. Now, that might be 10, 15 years away, but that was his job. He's now at Texas A&M. You've got the offensive coordinator at KU, who was hired by Penn State. I mean, Penn State hiring Kansas coordinators is not something that traditionally has happened. But the Big 12 has done a really good job with its offensive schemes staying ahead of the trend. So the running game is just as much of a factor as it's been in a very long time. And yes, they still air it out, but it's not what this league was in 2015. And a lot of people in more traditional college football media totally missed that. And they're still a few years behind the curve.
That's really interesting that you say that because it is, yeah. I mean, Lincoln Riley, okay, we'll say he's the example, but okay, that's really helpful. That's good to know kind of what we should look for and to expect from this year. Okay, this was a question that some of our fans wanted to know. Which stadiums do we absolutely need to visit? Or like what traditions do we need to see in person? What are the best ones?
All right. Well, you've got the game in Stillwater, September 21st, and I am trying to plan to be at that game, by the way. I have not been to Stillwater in a long time, and I've met many great Utah fans, so I know some are going to be there. But that game day tradition, Eskimo Joe's, the food, the bars, the quintessential college town, that is Stillwater, Oklahoma. So, I mean, that's got to be at the top of the list. And that's where you're going to get in a lot of these environments as well. Ames, Iowa, Manhattan, Kansas. Lawrence is a place that, KU's not actually playing in their football stadium this year. They're playing at Arrowhead, where the Chiefs play their games just because they got construction going on. But, that certainly for basketball is going to be a bucket list thing to go to Allen Fieldhouse. To me, that's one of the best sporting environments I've ever been in my life. So you're going to get some of that. And Texas Tech. I mean, you get Lubbock, especially at night. That place gets rowdy. It's an outstanding atmosphere. And I would not overlook, I know it's a long road trip, but Morgantown, West Virginia is one of the great and most underrated places. I would say Morgantown's the most underrated Big 12 town and game day environment out there. So I know that it may be a couple of years before these places land on Utah's road schedule, but those towns like TCU's great, but it's in Fort Worth, and Fort Worth's awesome. But Fort Worth, Dallas, it's a metro. It just has a different feel than a Stillwater, than an Ames, than a Manhattan, than a Lawrence, than a Lubbock, than a Morgantown. And that's where you really get that feel. And maybe the Pac-12 had some of that, and I can't speak to it, but maybe the Pullman Washingtons of the world. But I know most of those schools were in, major media markets. That's not the case for the Big 12, but it is going to be an incredible experience and very much quintessential college athletics.
How do you feel? There's talk, and I think it's probably just chatter on social media, but talk of like moving the championship game and stuff like that to Vegas versus in Arlington. What are like, how do you feel about that?
Now, I felt strongly about this, and I know I'm biased when I say this, but I really think, the Big 12 headquarters are there in Dallas, Fort Worth.
Mhm.
I think there's value in having ownership stake in the hottest recruiting bed in the country outside of maybe Houston. Your headquarters are there. It's still very centrally located in a conference that now spans 2,500 miles. And being in Jerry Jones' stadium, that still has some cachet to it. You're not going to top the SEC championship. I get it. You're probably not going to top the Big Ten championship. But having Jerry Jones' stadium, having that footprint, having that location, I still think is very valuable. I felt the same way for the Big 12 basketball tournament being in Kansas City, which I hope that Utah fans come and experience. Once again, I admit I'm totally biased when I say it, but even Brett Yormark, the commissioner, has told me, and his people have said this to me personally, and I've shared it on my show before. If you go to Vegas during championship week, there's a million things going on. There's shows, there's multiple tournaments, and I get it's more convenient for some fan bases, but owning a city and owning the attention of a community like Kansas City, which is 2.5 million people, there's value in that. You don't want to just be another thing. The one thing we're all competing for is attention. People have no attention spans anymore. If you can get the attention of a major metropolitan area, you do it. The Big 12 can do that with the Big 12 championship, because I'll tell you what, if they give up Jerry World, the SEC is going to bounce around and go there. I mean, they will gladly go to Jerry World for the SEC championship. So why give that up if you're the Big 12? And I think that's really the way to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, as a Utah fan, Vegas would be amazing for us. And we have very fond memories of Allegiant Stadium. But I get it. And I like it doesn't make a lot of sense to move everything to a state where we don't even have a team in the conference. So I think it makes sense keeping it in Texas. But, selfishly as a Utah fan, Vegas is much easier for us to get to.
And
But
I get it. I get it. But, I think that if Utah ends up in the Big 12 championship, which I expect to happen, I think that that stadium is going to have tens of thousands of Utah fans in it. And they're going to find themselves having a heck of a weekend in Arlington and the Dallas area.
we actually University of Utah has a lot of alumni that live in Texas,
Oh, very
so
cool.
I think and we travel well. Utah fans do travel well, and I've talked to a lot of fans who are gonna go to Stillwater, and we're excited for all the new, stadiums, new traditions, new towns that we just don't know. It's fun. All right, last question for you, and then I'll let you go. Do you have plans to come to Salt Lake for a game this year?
I wish. I do not. I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 6-month-old. So
Ah,
to stay happily married, I am going to pass on that trip for this season. But that's why I do want to get down to Stillwater. It's about a 4-hour drive. And I do want to see Utah desperately in person. I think that's the best game in the Big 12. It will set the tone for the entire season. So it's on my bucket list to get to a Utah game. That's why I'm eyeing the game in Stillwater. And then once the kids, get a little bit older, I will be making that trip out to Salt Lake because, man, I'm only hearing great things about the home atmosphere.
yeah, I mean, that's what I'll say, and no shade to you. We understand you gotta do what you gotta do for the family, but to anybody in the Big 12, come to Salt Lake for a game, come to Rice Eccles. People underestimate it all the time, but it is such a fantastic venue. It's gorgeous. I mean, we love it, but if you can get here, you definitely should. And so then, Pete, next year when you come, let us know. We'll have you stop by the tailgate. We'll host you and everything, all the good stuff.
I will look forward to that. Genuinely cannot wait to have this team, Utah, in the conference. I think it's going to be an awesome year of Big 12 football, and I really think that Utah fans are going to embrace it. They're going to like it, and I really think this is going to be, when all is said and done, one big happy family in the Big 12.
I agree. Hey, well, thank you so much for joining us again. Check out Pete on Heartland College Sports, and season starts next week. I mean, this is happening. We're so close. We can taste it. But thanks again, Pete, for coming.
Thanks, Brent. Appreciate you. And thanks to all the Utah fans who are checking us out at Heartland College Sports. Appreciate it.